Grace Whitfield's white cane tapped a steady rhythm against the sidewalk. Left, right, left, right. The same beat she had followed every single morning for the past 3 years along this stretch of northwest Portland. She knew this route the way most people knew their own reflection. 14 steps from her apartment door to the sidewalk. 32 steps to the first crosswalk. A slight curve to the left where the pavement dipped near the old bookstore. Then a long, straight stretch through the Pearl District toward Bridge Arts Community Center, where she taught piano to children who couldn't afford lessons anywhere else. Grace was 27 years old, fair-skinned black woman. She wore a simple olive green jacket over a white blouse, jeans, and flat shoes that made almost no sound when she walked. A canvas tote bag hung from her shoulder, stuffed with Braille music sheets and a sandwich she had made that morning. She had her earbuds in, listening to a recording of Debussy that she was memorizing for a lesson later that afternoon. She was independent, she was precise, she was completely blind. And today, the city of Portland had decided to rearrange itself without telling her. A construction crew had blocked her usual path with temporary barriers. Orange plastic fencing stretched across the sidewalk near a building renovation that had started sometime during the weekend. There were no audio warnings, no textured ground indicators, just a wall of plastic that Grace could not see, could not hear, and did not expect. Her cane hit the barrier and she stopped. She tilted her head, listening. Jackhammers to the left. A truck idling somewhere close. Voices she did not recognize. The soundscape of her route had changed, and for a blind person, a changed soundscape was like walking into a room where all the furniture had been moved in the dark. She adjusted, stepped slightly off the curb, tried to reroute based on the sound of foot traffic flowing around the construction zone. A bus rumbled past, close enough that she felt the heat of its exhaust against her calves. She moved further to the right, picking her way carefully along what she hoped was still the sidewalk. That was when she walked directly into someone, stepping out of a black SUV. The collision was solid. Her forehead hit something firm, a chest, a shoulder, and the impact knocked her tote bag off her shoulder. Braille sheets spilled across the wet pavement. Her cane clattered out of her hand and skittered away. For one terrible, disorienting moment, Grace lost all spatial awareness. She didn't know which direction she was facing. She didn't know if she was about to step into traffic. Her hands reached out instinctively, grabbing at air. A firm hand caught her forearm. Not rough, not yanking, just steady, controlled pressure that stopped her from stumbling forward. "I'm sorry," Grace said immediately, pulling back slightly but not pulling free. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't see that there's construction and my route is different and I didn't." "You are not hurt?" a voice asked. The voice was male, calm, measured. Accented Korean, she thought, or possibly Japanese, but the vowel sounds suggested Korean. The grip on her arm adjusted, becoming gentler now that she was stable, but the hand did not let go. "No," Grace said. "No, I'm fine. I can't see. I'm blind. I didn't know anyone was there." A pause. She felt the air shift as someone else moved behind the man. Then a second voice, also male, also Korean accented, said something rapid and low in Korean. The first man responded in Korean without turning his head. Grace caught a single word that she recognized from a documentary she had listened to once. "Duyo." It meant something like "it's fine" or "leave it." The second person stopped moving. "Your cane," the first voice said. "Where did it go?" "I don't know. It fell to my right, I think." She heard the sound of fabric shifting, knees bending, the quiet scrape of something being picked up off wet concrete. Then the same sounds repeated, papers being gathered, tapped into a neat stack. The man was kneeling on the ground, collecting her things. She could hear it clearly. Someone was on their knees on a public sidewalk in Portland, picking up her scattered Braille sheets. He stood. She heard the precise way he rose, no grunt of effort, no shifting for balance. Controlled. The way someone who was physically disciplined moved. The cane was placed into her right hand, handle first. Then the stack of Braille sheets was held out. She reached for them and their fingers touched briefly. His hands were dry and warm. She took the papers and pressed them against her chest. "Thank you," she said. "Really, I'm sorry for bumping into you." "The construction barrier has no audio signal," he said. "That is not your fault. The city should have marked it properly." Grace tilted her head slightly. This was the instinct of a blind person. You aimed your ear toward the source of a voice to hear it better. Most people didn't notice. This man noticed. She could feel his attention shift, the way the air between them became more still, as if he was studying her. "I appreciate that," she said quietly. The second voice spoke again in Korean. This time the tone carried urgency. The first man responded with a single syllable. Then, to Grace, "Be careful walking. The barrier extends about 30 feet. Stay close to the building on your right and you will clear it." "Thank you," she said again. She heard the click of shoes on pavement. Military shoes, hard-soled, precise. The opening of a heavy car door. A brief exchange in Korean inside the vehicle. The door closed. The SUV pulled away, its engine sound disappearing into the hum of Portland traffic. Grace stood on the sidewalk holding her braille sheets against her chest. Her heart was still beating fast from the collision and the disorientation. But underneath the adrenaline, something else lingered. The steadiness of his hand. The fact that he had knelt down to pick up her things. The fact that he had not raised his voice, had not sounded annoyed, had not treated her like she was a problem to be managed. She shook it off, adjusted her tote bag, found the building wall with her cane and followed it past the construction zone, just as he had told her to. She was 4 minutes late to work. That never happened. Inside the black SUV, Colonel Jae-ho Seon of the Republic of Korea Navy sat in the back seat. His white naval cap was in his lap, slightly knocked off-center from the collision. His formal white uniform was immaculate except for a faint smudge near his left shoulder where Grace's forehead had made contact. His aide, Lieutenant Byun, sat in the front passenger seat, reviewing the colonel's schedule on a tablet. A meeting at the Naval Coordination Office at 10. A briefing with American counterparts at 1. A dinner with senior officials at 7. Jae-ho was not listening. He was looking out the window at the sidewalk they had just left. The construction barriers. The absence of any accommodation for someone who could not see. "Lieutenant," Jae-ho said. "Sir, does the city of Portland typically leave construction zones unmarked for visually impaired pedestrians?" Byun looked up from the tablet. "I would not know, sir." Jae-ho said nothing else. But that evening, back in his temporary residence in Portland's Nob Hill neighborhood, a well-appointed apartment provided by the liaison program, he sat at his desk in uniform trousers and an undershirt, reviewing documents he should have finished an hour ago. His mind kept returning to the woman on the sidewalk. Not her appearance, though he had noticed that too. Her voice. The immediate apology. The way she had said, "I'm sorry," before she even assessed whether she was hurt, as if her first instinct when colliding with a stranger was to take the blame for a failure that belonged to the city. He opened his laptop. He did not search for her name because he did not know it. He searched for community centers near the Pearl District that offered music programs. He found 3 results. He stared at them. Then he closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. The next morning, Jae-ho contacted a private security company he had used previously for personal safety assessments. He gave specific instructions. He wanted someone to identify a young blind woman who walked through the Pearl District around 8:30 in the morning, likely connected to a music program or community center. He wanted to confirm her name, where she worked, and whether she had a safe route to get there. He emphasized one word when he gave the order: safe. Lieutenant Byun overheard the call. He looked at Jae-ho with unconcealed surprise. Jae-ho met his gaze with a flat expression that made the lieutenant look away. Within 48 hours, Jae-ho had a file. Grace Whitfield. Age 27. Piano instructor at Bridge Arts Community Center. Visually impaired since age 9 due to a degenerative retinal condition. Lives alone in a modest apartment in southeast Portland. No emergency contact listed at her workplace. No family in the city. Jae-ho read the file once, then he read it again. Then he gave an order that would change both of their lives. He instructed the security company to maintain a quiet, ongoing watch, not surveillance, Not tracking. Watch. He wanted someone nearby when she walked to work. He wanted the city to fix that construction barrier. He wanted to know that she was safe. He did not fully understand why. And Grace, 3 blocks away, sitting at an upright piano with a 7-year-old boy, guiding his small fingers to middle C, had no idea that a Korean colonel she had bumped into for 12 seconds on a sidewalk was quietly rearranging the world around her. Now let me ask you something. If a complete stranger went this far just to make sure you were safe, would that comfort you or would it scare you? Drop your answer in the comments right now. And if you have not already, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, because this story is about to take turns you are absolutely not ready for. Grace's daily routine was a masterpiece of precision. She woke at 6:15 every morning. She made coffee by counting scoops, 2 level tablespoons per cup always. She showered and dressed using a system she had built herself over 18 years of blindness. Fabric textures, button types, and small braille tags sewn into every garment told her exactly what she was putting on. She never left the house mismatched. She never left the house unsure. She walked the same route at the same time every day, cane first, earbuds in, classical music filling the space between her ears and the noise of the city. She had memorized Portland's grid the way a pilot memorized instrument panels, not by sight but by pattern, sound, and repetition. At Bridge Arts Community Center, she taught piano to children from low-income families. 6 students 3 days a week, ages 7 to 13. She was patient. She was funny when she wanted to be. She was firm when a kid tried to skip practice and thought she would not notice. She always noticed. Blind did not mean unaware. If anything, Grace was more aware than most sighted people in any room she entered. Her boss, Diane Mayers, was a 52-year-old woman who ran Bridge Arts with the energy of someone half her age and the worry of someone twice it. Diane adored Grace. She also fussed over her constantly, offering rides, checking weather reports, reminding her about uneven spots on the sidewalk. Grace tolerated it because Diane meant well, but the fussing chafed. Grace did not need a mother. She had already lost one. Grace's mother, Ruth Whitfield, had died 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. Grace had flown to Savannah, Georgia, where Ruth still lived, and spent the last 6 weeks of her mother's life sitting beside her hospital bed, holding her hand, listening to her breathe. Ruth was the only person who had ever treated Grace's blindness as a fact rather than a tragedy. She did not pity Grace. She did not overcompensate. She simply loved her daughter and expected her to live fully, with or without sight. Grace's father, Leonard, had left when she was 11, 1 year after her diagnosis. He could not handle a disabled child. He never said that directly, but he did not need to. His absence said it loudly enough. Her older brother, Terrence, lived in Atlanta. He was a corporate attorney. Successful, busy, guilty. He sent money sometimes. Grace sent it back every single time. She did not want his money. She wanted him to call. He rarely did. So Grace had built a life where she needed no one, and she was proud of it. But pride and loneliness lived in the same house, and some nights, sitting alone at her piano in her small apartment, she could not tell which one was keeping her company. Meanwhile, Jai-ho's quiet operation continued without her knowledge. He received brief daily reports from the security company. Grace walked to work at 8:32. The construction barrier on her route had been removed, and proper audio signals had been installed after Jai-ho filed a formal complaint with the city's ADA compliance office. She stopped at a coffee shop on Burnside Street most mornings. She walked home by 5:45. No incidents. Jai-ho read these reports the way he read military briefings, with focus, efficiency, and an analytical eye for detail. But he found himself reading them more slowly than he read briefings. He learned small things. Grace always ordered a chai latte with oat milk. She hummed while she walked, usually Chopin or Debussy. She touched walls and railings as she passed them, not because she needed the guidance, but the way someone might run their hand along a shelf of beloved books. Lieutenant Bayun finally asked him directly. They were in the car heading to a coordination meeting, and Bayun turned in his seat and said, "Sir, permission to speak freely." "Granted." "Why are you doing this?" Jai-ho's response was measured. She was placed in an unsafe situation due to civic negligence. She is visually impaired and has no local support system. It costs me very little to ensure she is not put at risk again. Bayan did not buy it. His face said so clearly. But he was a lieutenant speaking to a colonel, so he nodded and turned back around. 3 weeks into the watch, Grace began to notice things. Not the security detail. They were professionals, and they kept their distance. But the aftermath of Jaiho's interventions was harder to hide. The construction barrier on her route had been fixed within 2 days, and a city worker had told her that someone had filed a formal ADA complaint on her behalf. Her coffee shop on Burnside told her that her tab had been covered for the entire week by an anonymous patron. And a package arrived at Bridge Arts, a box with no return address containing a set of premium Braille music sheets, the expensive kind printed on heavy cardstock that held up to repeated touch. Grace could not afford these herself. She had been using photocopied Braille sheets that wore out every few months. She ran her fingers over the new sheets slowly. They were beautiful to the touch, crisp, precise. Someone had chosen them carefully. Grace was not charmed. She was disturbed. She asked Diane if anyone had been asking about her. Diane said no. She asked the coffee shop barista who had paid her tab. The barista said a man had come in and paid in cash and left without giving a name. Well-dressed, the barista said. Quiet. Grace changed her routine. She left for work 5 minutes earlier. She took different streets. She stopped going to the coffee shop on Burnside entirely. The security detail reported the changes to Jaiho. He sat with the information for a long time. Then he understood something he had not anticipated. His good intentions were frightening her. In his world, the military, diplomacy, hierarchy protection was an act of respect. In her world, a blind woman living alone, navigating a city that was not built for her, unseen attention from an unknown person was not a gift. It was a threat. He had made a mistake. And Jaiho Sion was not a man who made mistakes often, which meant he was not a man who knew how to sit comfortably with having made one. That evening, he sat at his desk staring at the latest report. He had 2 options: stop everything and walk away from her life forever, or find a way to let her know who he was and accept whatever came next. He picked up his phone, not to call his security team. He called Bridge Arts Community Center. He asked about their music program. He said he would like to make a donation. Jaiho arrived at Bridge Arts on a Tuesday afternoon. He wore civilian clothes, a dark navy crew neck sweater over a white shirt, clean trousers, simple leather shoes. No insignia, no rank, no uniform. Lieutenant Bayan accompanied him but stayed near the front entrance, scrolling through his phone like a bored friend waiting in a lobby. The community center was modest. Scuffed linoleum floors, donated furniture that did not match. Bright murals painted by children covered 2 full walls of the main hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. It was nothing like the environments Jaiho operated in, the polished coordination offices, the embassy function rooms, the naval briefing halls. But there was something alive about this place. Something that smelled like tempera paint and microwave popcorn, and the particular energy of children who were being given something they had not expected. From behind a closed door at the end of the hallway, he heard a piano, and then he heard her voice. Grace was teaching a 10-year-old boy named Miles a simplified version of Claire de Lune. Her voice was patient and specific. Okay, Miles, feel that black key right under your index finger. That's your anchor. You always come back to that one. Try it again from the top. Slower. Let the notes breathe. Miles played. He stumbled on the 3rd measure. Grace laughed, a real laugh, warm and surprised, and said, "You're rushing because you're excited. That's a good problem to have. Let's try it again." Jaiho stood in the hallway and listened. He had stopped walking without realizing it. His hand was on the wall beside the door, and he stood there for almost a full minute before Diane Mayers appeared beside him. Diane was short, energetic, and direct. She shook his hand firmly, thanked him for his interest in the program, and launched into a tour. Jaiho asked thoughtful questions about their funding model, about how many kids they served, about how instructors like Grace were compensated and supported. He listened carefully to every answer. At the end of the tour, he wrote a personal check. The amount was significant, not performative, not flashy, but meaningful. Diane looked at the check, and then looked at him like she was trying to figure out who he really was. Before she could ask, the piano room door opened. Grace walked out with Miles, her white cane in her left hand and her right hand resting on the boy's shoulder. Miles was guiding her toward the lobby where his mother waited. Grace was smiling. Her face was relaxed. She looked like a different person than the guarded, careful woman who navigated the streets outside. Then she stopped walking. Her head tilted to the left, her nostrils flared slightly. Not cologne, it was subtler. Clean linen and something faintly cedar. She had smelled it before, 3 weeks ago on a sidewalk when a stranger had knelt to pick up her scattered braille sheets. She listened. The hallway had 2 other people in it, Diane and the man. Diane's breathing and footstep pattern were familiar. The other person was standing very still, not the fidgety stillness of someone waiting. The controlled stillness of someone trained to be motionless. Weight distributed evenly. No shifting. Military bearing made a specific sound, or rather, a specific absence of sound. "I know you," Grace said quietly. Jai-Ho hesitated for 1 beat. Then, "Yes, we met on the sidewalk a few weeks ago. I am the one you bumped into." Grace's expression shifted. The warmth she had been wearing for Miles drained away, replaced by something careful and guarded. She sent Miles toward his mother with a gentle pat on his shoulder, then turned back toward Jai-Ho's voice. "You're the one who has been doing things," she said. It was not a question. Jai-Ho did not lie. He told her. The Ada complaint, the coffee shop tab, the braille sheets. He told her that after their collision, he realized she was navigating a city that had failed to accommodate her, and she was doing it alone, and he wanted to make it easier. Grace's jaw tightened. "I did not ask you to do any of that." "I know. I have spent my entire adult life building my independence. Do you understand what that means for someone like me? It means every single day, I prove to the world and to myself that I do not need to be managed. And you, a stranger, decided to secretly manage parts of my world without my knowledge or my permission. That is not kindness. That is control." The hallway was very quiet. Deanne had silently retreated to her office. Miles and his mother were gone. It was just Grace and Jai-Ho, standing 10 feet apart in a hallway decorated with children's paintings. Jai-Ho was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You are right. I should have introduced myself first. I should have asked. I am sorry." Grace had been ready for an argument. She had been ready for defensiveness, for justification, for the kind of well-meaning condescension she had dealt with her entire life. She was not ready for a clean, unqualified apology. She did not forgive him, but she did not walk away. "What is your name?" she asked. "Jai-Ho Sion, Colonel, Republic of Korea Navy. I am stationed in Portland on a liaison assignment." "A military officer," she said, processing this. Why would a Korean colonel care about a random blind woman he bumped into on a sidewalk? He paused, then, "Because you apologized to me before you even checked if you were hurt. The city failed you and your first instinct was to take the blame. And you meant it. That stayed with me." Grace did not respond to that. She turned and walked back toward the piano room, navigating the hallway with practiced ease. At the door, she stopped. Without turning around, she said, "If you want to help this program, talk to Diane, but do not do anything else for me in secret, ever." She went inside and closed the door. Jai-Ho stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at that closed door, before Bayan appeared and quietly suggested they leave. "Before we continue with this stories, I need you to do something for me. I pour my heart into these movies, and it genuinely hurts when people watch without subscribing. Please, just take 1 second and subscribe. It's free, and it means the world to me. Also, drop a comment telling me which city you are watching from. I want to know where all my amazing viewers are located." Over the next 3 weeks, Jai-Ho began showing up at Bridge Arts. Not every day, his military schedule made that impossible, but 2 or 3 times a week, he arrived in civilian clothes and worked. He assembled bookshelves. He repainted the supply closet. He sat with kids during the after-school program and helped them with homework, his English patient and precise even when a 9-year-old asked him to explain fractions for the 4th time. He never mentioned Grace. He never sought her out. He never stood outside the piano room door. He simply existed in the same space as her, consistently, without agenda. Grace was cold to him at first. Not rude, she was too deliberate for rudeness, but she kept the walls high. She called him Colonel Sion. She did not make small talk. When he was in the piano room helping a child while she taught, she behaved as if he were furniture. Jai-ho did not push. He understood patience the way a military strategist understood terrain. You did not force your way across difficult ground. You studied it. You adapted. You waited. The first crack came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Grace's rideshare was late. She stood under the awning outside the center, cane in hand, rain hammering the pavement beyond the overhang. Jai-ho was leaving at the same time. He did not offer her a ride. Something told him she would refuse. Instead, he simply stood beside her under the awning and waited. "Are you waiting for a ride?" she asked. "No." "Then why are you standing here?" "Because if I leave and your ride does not come, you will be standing in the rain alone. I would rather that did not happen." A beat of silence. Then the corner of Grace's mouth twitched, almost a smile, almost. Her ride arrived. She got in without saying goodbye. But the next day at the center, she called him Jai-ho for the first time instead of Colonel Sion. She said it casually, as if it were nothing. He noticed. He did not react. But Bayan, who was picking him up outside, saw something shift in the colonel's expression and wisely said nothing. Weeks passed. Small moments accumulated. Jai-ho learned that Grace drank her chai latte with oat milk at exactly the temperature where it was warm but not hot, because she could not see steam to warn her. He learned that she arranged her braille sheets by composer, then by difficulty level, using a paper clip system she had invented. He learned that she sang under her breath when she thought she was alone, and her singing voice was low and beautiful, and carried a sadness she would never have shown anyone intentionally. Grace learned things too. Jai-ho was meticulous. He folded supply room towels into perfect rectangles. He spoke to children with the same respectful tone he used with adults, never condescending, never performing warmth. He was quiet in a way that was not empty but full, like a room with thick walls that kept the noise out. One afternoon, Grace was playing the piano alone after hours. She thought the center was empty. The piece she played was something she had composed herself, slow, haunting, technically intricate, and deeply emotional. It built in waves, each phrase more exposed than the last, until the final measures were so raw they barely held together. Jai-ho had returned to drop off art supplies Diane had requested. He heard the music from the hallway and stopped. He set the boxes down silently on the floor. He stood by the cracked door and listened. He listened for 8 minutes without moving, without breathing loudly, without shifting his weight. When Grace finished, the silence was heavy. She sat at the bench and pressed her palms flat on the keys without playing, a habit she had when she was holding something inside. Then she said, to the empty room, "I wrote that for you, Mom." Jai-ho stood right there. He could have spoken. He could have let her know he had heard. Instead, he picked up the boxes quietly, left them at the front desk, and walked out without making a sound. He sat in his car for a long time before starting the engine. That evening, Jai-ho called his mother in Seoul. The conversation was in Korean, warm and familiar. His mother asked about his health, his work, his meals. Then she asked carefully if he had met anyone. Jai-ho deflected. His mother pressed gently. She reminded him that his father, a retired general, had married a woman from a completely different world, a school teacher from a small town, and it was the best decision he had ever made. "You sound different, Jai-ho," his mother said. "You sound like you are paying attention to something that is not work. That is good." Jai-ho said nothing. But after he hung up, he sat in his apartment and thought about Grace's hands on the piano keys, playing a piece for a woman who could no longer hear it, and he understood something about himself that he had been avoiding for a very long time. He was lonely too. He had just been better at hiding it. His name was Wade Prescott, mid-40s, real estate developer, connected politically, financially, and socially across Portland's upper circles. He sat on the boards of several nonprofits in the city, including Bridge Arts Community Center. His donations were generous, his handshakes were firm, and his smile was the kind that never quite reached his eyes. Wade had been circling Grace for over a year. He never crossed an obvious line. He was too smart for that, but he stood too close when he visited the center. His hand lingered when he guided her to a chair she had not asked to be guided to. His compliments were technically polite but carried an undercurrent that made Grace's skin tighten. "You look nice today, Grace. You should not be walking home alone in the dark. Well, I guess it is always dark for you, isn't it?" He had laughed at that. Grace had not. She handled Wade the way she handled most threats, with distance and deflection. She could not see his expressions, but she could hear the shift in his breathing when he stood near her. She could feel the way he positioned himself between her and the door. She had told Diane she was uncomfortable. Diane believed her but was cautious. Wade's donations kept the lights on. The day Wade noticed Jaiho, everything changed. Wade arrived for a board visit and found a Korean man in a crew neck sweater helping kids with an art project at the center's main table. He asked Diane who he was. When Diane explained, a military officer, a recent donor, a volunteer, Wade's mouth smiled, but his eyes went flat. He approached Jaiho directly. The conversation was polite on the surface, but loaded underneath. Wade made a remark about foreign military personnel getting involved in local community matters, framing it as concern for the children's environment. Jaiho read him in 3 seconds. 20 years of navigating military hierarchies and international power dynamics had made Jaiho an expert in identifying men who used charm as a weapon. Jaiho responded calmly, without aggression, and with a level of precise composure that made Wade feel like he was standing next to something he could not control. Wade did not like that feeling. After Jaiho left that afternoon, Wade found Grace in the piano room. He closed the door behind him. He told her he was concerned about her spending time with a man she barely knew. He said he had been looking out for her for a long time, and it troubled him to see someone new taking advantage of her trust. His hand settled on her shoulder. Grace moved away. He stepped closer. "Step back," Grace said. Her voice was level. Her hand tightened around her cane. Wade chuckled softly. "I'm just being friendly, Grace. You don't need to be so defensive." He left. Grace sat down at the piano bench and pressed her palms flat on the keys. Her heart was racing. She did not tell Jaiho. She did not tell Diane. She did not tell anyone, because she had handled everything alone her entire life, and asking for help felt like admitting that every person who had ever said she could not take care of herself was right. But Jaiho's security detail, which he had scaled back but never fully ended, reported something that evening. Wade Prescott had visited Grace's apartment building after hours. He did not go inside. He sat in his car across the street for 22 minutes, staring up at her window. Then he drove away. Jaiho read the report at his desk. His expression did not change, but his hand slowly closed into a fist against the wood surface. He picked up his phone and called his security team. His instructions were short: full background check on Wade Prescott. Business dealings, personal history, legal records, complaints filed, complaints withdrawn. Everything. The background check revealed a pattern that turned Jaiho's stomach. 3 different women in the Portland area had filed complaints against Wade Prescott over the past 7 years. 2 for harassment, 1 for stalking. All 3 complaints had been quietly withdrawn. In each case, the woman was someone vulnerable: a single mother in a housing program Wade funded, a young intern at his development company, a nonprofit worker whose organization depended on his money. Wade had never faced formal consequences because he was wealthy, connected, and meticulous. He never left evidence that would survive a courtroom. He operated in the gray space between what was wrong and what could be proved. Jaiho did not operate in gray spaces. He never had. He went to Grace's apartment, not to the center, not to a neutral location. He knocked on her door. She opened it and recognized him before he spoke: his footstep pattern in the hallway, the rhythm of his knock, the clean cedar scent that she now associated with safety. "Why are you here?" she asked. He told her what he had found. He laid out the facts about Wade without embellishment. 3 women, 7 years. A pattern of predatory behavior targeting women who could not fight back without risking their own stability. He told her that Wade had been sitting outside her building 2 nights ago. Then he said, "I am telling you this because you deserve to know who is near you. What you do with this information is your decision." Grace was silent for a long time. Then she asked how he knew all of this. He told her the truth, the security detail, the background check. He told her he knew she had asked him to stop doing things behind her back, and he admitted he had not fully stopped. He told her he would accept whatever she said next. Grace stood in her doorway, one hand on the frame, the other gripping her cane so hard her knuckles paled. She was furious. She was frightened. And she was underneath everything relieved. Because she had been carrying the weight of Wade's attention alone, telling herself it was manageable, telling herself it was not that bad. And now someone was standing in her doorway saying it is that bad, and here is the proof. "Come inside," she said. Jai-ho entered her apartment for the first time. It was small, clean, and precisely organized. Every object had a designated place. The piano in the corner, a used upright she had saved for 2 years to buy, was the most valuable thing in the room. He sat on the couch. She sat across from him in an armchair, and for the first time they truly talked. She told him about losing her sight at 9, about watching the world dim over 2 years until there was nothing left. She told him about her mother, the only person who had never treated her blindness as a limitation. She told him about her father leaving, about Terrence in Atlanta, sending checks she never cashed. She told him that independence was not a preference. It was survival, because every person she had ever depended on had disappeared. Jai-ho listened without interrupting. When she finished, he told her about himself. The military family, his father a general, his grandfather a veteran of the Korean War. The weight of expectation that came with that name. The loneliness of being a man everyone saluted but no one truly knew. He told her he had never sat in someone's apartment and spoken like this. Not once in his entire life. Grace asked him why he cared about her, specifically her, not as a charitable cause, her. Jai-ho was quiet. Then he said, "The day you bumped into me, you apologized before you even knew if you were hurt. You did not ask who I was. You did not care about my rank. You treated me like a person instead of a title. You have no idea how rare that is for someone like me." Grace felt her eyes sting. She had not cried in front of another person in years. She did not cry now, but she reached her hand out, palm up, across the space between them. Jai-ho looked at it. Then he took it. Her fingers closed around his. They sat like that in the quiet of her apartment for a long time, saying nothing, needing nothing. 2 people who had been alone in different ways finally sitting still in the same room. Please do well to subscribe if you haven't done so, like the video, comment where you're watching from as well. Thank you. Jai-ho handled Wade Prescott the way he handled every operation, strategically, legally, and with the kind of precision that left no room for counterattack. First, his security team's investigator made contact with the 3 women who had previously filed complaints against Wade. They were approached carefully, respectfully, and given something they had not had before, a path forward. Jai-ho connected them with a respected harassment attorney in Portland and covered the legal fees anonymously. One by one, the women agreed to refile their complaints or provide updated statements. They had been scared before. They had been alone before. Now they were neither. Second, Jai-ho used his professional and diplomatic connections, not military channels, but the relationships he had built during his liaison work, to ensure that Portland's civic and business leaders understood that Wade Prescott's pattern was documented and that any institution still supporting him when the information went public would share in the scrutiny. He did not threaten anyone. He did not raise his voice. He simply made the truth available to the right people at the right time. This was how real power worked, not with force, but with leverage and timing. Third, and most importantly, he helped Grace file her own formal complaint, not because she could not do it alone. She could, and she made that fiercely clear, but he drove her to the attorney's office. He sat in the lobby while she gave her statement. He did not listen. He did not hover. He simply waited. When she came out, her hands were trembling, not from fear, from the weight of finally speaking aloud what she had been carrying silently. He handed her a cup, chai latte, oat milk, the right temperature. She took it, her fingers shook against the cup. "You remembered my order," she said quietly. "I remember everything about you," he said. Wade Prescott discovered what was happening on a Thursday afternoon. His attorney called with the news that multiple harassment complaints were being consolidated and that a journalist from the Portland Tribune had started asking questions. Wade's carefully constructed world, the one where money bought silence and power bought forgetting, began to crack. He showed up at Bridge Arts the following Monday. He walked through the front door like he still owned the place and demanded to speak to Grace. Diane Mayers intercepted him in the hallway and told him, with a voice that shook but did not break, that he was no longer welcome at the center. The board had held an emergency vote. Wade Prescott had been removed from his position, effective immediately. Wade's face turned red. He stepped toward Diane. "You can't do this. I built this place, without my money." A door opened at the end of the hallway. Jai-Ho stepped out. He was in his full white naval uniform, white jacket, rank insignia, white cap. He had been at the center to pick Grace up for a follow-up meeting with the attorney when Wade arrived. Jai-Ho walked down the hallway and positioned himself between Wade and the piano room door. He did not speak. He did not need to. His posture, his uniform, his absolute stillness, it was the most controlled display of authority Wade had ever encountered. "This is none of your business," Wade said. "You're a foreign soldier playing dress-up in a children's center." Jai-Ho's voice was so calm it was almost conversational. "Mr. Prescott, 3 women have filed formal statements. A 4th is being processed. The Portland Tribune has your name, and you are standing in a children's center raising your voice. I suggest you leave while leaving is still your choice." Wade stared at him. For the first time in 7 years, he was looking at someone he could not intimidate, could not buy, and could not outlast. He turned and walked out. His hands were shaking, not from fear of Jai-Ho, but from fear of exposure. The thing he had avoided for 7 years was finally here. Grace had heard every word through the piano room door. When Jai-Ho opened it, she was standing by the bench. She said, "I heard you." "I am sorry if I overstepped," he said. She shook her head. "You didn't." She crossed the room. She knew the dimensions by heart, 14 steps from the bench to the door, the wall on her left, the music stand she needed to step around. She stopped in front of him and reached up. Her fingers touched his face, slowly. His jawline first, then his cheekbones, the bridge of his nose, his brow. This was how she saw. Her fingertips moved carefully, learning the geography of his face the way she had learned every route she walked, through touch, through patience, through trust. Jai-Ho did not move. He barely breathed. "Now I know what you look like," she whispered. He closed his eyes and let her see him. The orders arrived on a Monday morning. Jai-Ho's liaison assignment in Portland was officially ending. He was being reassigned to a post in South Korea, effective in 3 weeks. This was not a suggestion. This was a military directive from Naval Command. Jai-Ho had never in his career considered questioning an order. The Navy was not his profession. It was his identity, his family legacy, the structure upon which every element of his life was built. His father had served. His grandfather had served. Duty was the air he breathed. But for the first time, duty was asking him to leave behind something that had begun to matter more than structure. He did not tell Grace immediately. He carried the information for 2 days, showing up at the center, helping the kids, sitting near her while she taught. He said nothing, but Grace knew something was wrong. She could hear it in his breathing, shorter, tighter than usual. She could feel it in the pauses before he spoke, as if he were weighing every word more carefully. She asked him directly one evening as he walked her home. They had started walking together most evenings, her hand resting on his arm, not because she needed the guidance, but because she wanted to be near him. "What is wrong?" she said. He told her. Reassignment, South Korea, 3 weeks. Grace stopped walking. They were on the sidewalk near her apartment. The evening air was cool and carried the smell of rain that had not yet arrived. She pulled her hand off his arm and stood still. She was quiet for a long time. Then, "I knew this was not permanent." "It does not have to end," he said. "How you will be on the other side of the world. I cannot see, Jai-ho. I cannot FaceTime you. I cannot read your texts. I cannot look at photographs you send. For me, long distance is just a voice that eventually goes quiet. That is all it ever is." This was the most vulnerable she had been in their entire relationship. This was the core wound. Every person she had needed had left. Her father, her brother, and now the one man who had made her feel visible, who had made a blind woman feel truly seen, was leaving too. Jai-ho did not argue. He did not make promises he could not guarantee. He said, "Give me time, let me think." The situation worsened before he could find a solution. Wade Prescott, whose world was collapsing around him, made a desperate play. He contacted the Korean Naval Liaison Office and filed a formal complaint alleging that Colonel Jai-ho Seon had misused his position by engaging a private security company to surveil an American civilian for personal romantic purposes. He provided selectively framed details designed to make Jai-ho's actions appear as professional misconduct. The complaint landed on the desk of Rear Admiral Park in Seoul. A formal conduct review was initiated. Jai-ho was summoned to a video conference and informed that his actions were under investigation. If the review found fault, the consequences could range from a formal reprimand to reassignment to a non-operational post, effectively ending his career trajectory. Jai-ho accepted the review without protest. He provided complete documentation of his actions, including the safety concerns that had motivated the initial watch and the full Wade Prescott situation. He held nothing back. But the damage was immediate. His departure was accelerated. 3 weeks became one. Grace found out from Lieutenant Bayan, who came to Bridge Arts to tell her because Jai-ho had refused to do it himself. He did not want her to feel responsible for his troubles. He did not want her guilt added to her grief. Grace sat at the piano after Bayan left. She placed her palms flat on the keys. She felt something she had not felt in years, a rage so deep and clean it burned through every defense she had built. Not at Jai-ho, at the pattern, at a world that kept taking things from her and calling it fate. Then she did something she had never done before. She picked up her phone and used the voice command to call her brother in Atlanta. Terrence answered on the third ring, confused, because Grace never called. "I need your help," she said. Grace Whitfield did not let this story end the way every other story in her life had ended. She contacted the attorney handling the Wade Prescott case and provided a detailed statement about Wade's complaint against Jai-ho. She laid out the timeline clearly: Wade's pattern of harassment, Jai-ho's role in exposing it, and the fact that Wade's military complaint was filed specifically to retaliate against the man who had helped bring him to account. The attorney added the retaliation angle to the consolidated case file. It was damning. It showed that Wade's behavior was not just predatory, it was systematic. He did not just harass women, he destroyed anyone who tried to stop him. Terrence Whitfield landed in Portland the next morning. He had taken the first flight from Atlanta without packing more than a carry-on. He was 31, tall, with their father's build and their mother's eyes, and he had not seen his sister in over 2 years. He showed up at her apartment, and when she opened the door, the silence between them was heavy with years of distance and guilt and unsaid things. They sat at her kitchen table and talked for 3 hours. Grace told him everything about Jai-ho, about Wade, about her life in Portland, about the loneliness she had never admitted to anyone. Terrence broke down. He told her he had stayed away because he did not know how to be around her without feeling useless. He could not fix her eyes. He could not undo their father leaving. He could not bring their mother back. And so he had stayed in Atlanta, sending money she never cashed, telling himself she was strong enough to not need him. "I would rather have a brother who tries badly," Grace said, "than one who does not try at all." Terrence wiped his eyes and nodded. Then he got to work. As a corporate attorney with a strong professional network, Terrence connected with the investigation surrounding Jai-ho's conduct review. He prepared a formal statement as Grace's family representative, confirming that the safety concerns Jai-ho had acted on were legitimate and that his actions had directly led to the exposure of a serial harasser who had evaded accountability for 7 years. He also filed a counter-complaint against Wade Prescott for submitting a fraudulent military conduct report with retaliatory intent. The investigation concluded within 10 days. Rear Admiral Park reviewed the full record, Jai-ho's documentation, the attorney's case file, Terrence's statement, and the growing media coverage of Wade's pattern. The Admiral determined that Colonel Seon's conduct, while unconventional, was consistent with the values of the Republic of Korea Navy: protection of civilians, integrity, and moral courage. The review was closed. Jai-ho's record was clean. But the Portland assignment was still ending. That had not changed. Jai-ho was still being reassigned. He had a private conversation with Rear Admiral Park. It was the most personal thing Jai-ho had ever said to a superior officer. "Sir, I have given every year of my adult life to the Navy. I have served where I was sent without question. I am not questioning now, but I am requesting, respectfully, a post that allows me to remain in the United States, not because I am abandoning my duty, because I have found something worth protecting that does not appear on any map." Admiral Park was quiet for a long time. Then he said, in Korean with a faint smile, "Your father said something very similar to me once, about your mother." Jai-ho was reassigned to the Korean Naval Attaché Office at the Embassy of the Republic of Korea in Washington, D.C. It was a prestigious position. It kept him in the United States, and it was close enough to matter. Jai-ho did not tell Grace. He flew to Washington. He reported to his new post. He settled into an apartment in Georgetown. Then he called Terrence. "Does she still play the piece she wrote for her mother?" he asked. Terrence paused. "Every night." Jai-ho made one more call. This one was to Seoul. To an artisan his mother had recommended, a craftsman who made handmade music boxes with custom melodies. Jai-ho hummed the melody over the phone. He had heard it once, standing outside a piano room door, and he had memorized every note. The artisan listened, asked him to hum it twice more, and said the box would be ready in 2 weeks. 1 month passed. Grace's life had changed. The Wade Prescott story had broken publicly. Multiple outlets covered the pattern of complaints. Wade's business partnerships dissolved. His political connections evaporated. He was finished not by violence, not by intimidation, but by truth. The women he had silenced for years had finally been heard. Bridge Arts thrived in the aftermath. Community support surged. New donors appeared. The center hired 2 additional instructors. Diane promoted Grace to music program director, and Grace accepted with the condition that she still got to teach piano herself. She was not giving up the bench. From the outside, Grace was thriving. She had a title, a team, a purpose. Her brother called every Sunday. Her life was fuller than it had been in years. But every evening, she came home to her apartment, sat at her piano, and played the piece she had written for her mother. And in the silence after the last note faded, she thought about Jai-ho. She had not heard from him in 2 weeks. She assumed he was gone. Back to South Korea, back to his world, back to a life that did not include a blind piano teacher in Portland, Oregon. Another person who left. On a Tuesday evening, she was playing the piece when she heard a knock at her door. She stopped, her fingers hovering above the keys. She listened. The knock came again, 3 short, 2 spaced, the exact pattern he had always used. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She stood up from the bench. She crossed the apartment 12 steps to the door, around the coffee table, past the bookshelf, and opened it. Jai-ho was standing there, not in his white naval uniform, in a simple dark sweater and jeans. He was holding a small wooden box, dark-stained and smooth, about the size of his 2 hands placed together. "Before you say anything," he said, "open this." Grace took the box. It was warm from his hands. She felt the grain of the wood under her fingertips, the small brass hinge, the delicate clasp. She opened it. A melody began to play. Thin and sweet, the tiny metal tines of a music box plucking out notes one by one. It took her 4 notes to recognize it. By the 6th note, her breath caught. By the 8th, her hands were shaking. It was her piece, the one she had written for her mother, the one she had played alone in the piano room at Bridge Arts, thinking no one was listening. "You heard me that day," she whispered. "You were there." "I was there. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it was not mine to hear. But I wanted you to have it back in a form you can hold whenever you need it." Grace pressed the music box against her chest. Tears ran down her face. She did not wipe them. She did not hide them. She stood in her doorway and cried openly for the first time in years, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming, terrifying experience of being known. Truly, fully known by another person. She reached forward, grabbed the front of his sweater, and pulled him inside. She wrapped her arms around him and pressed her face against his chest. He held her. His arms closed around her slowly, carefully, and then tightly. They stood in the entryway of her apartment, the music box still playing its tiny melody between them, and neither of them moved. "I'm in Washington now," he said into her hair. "Naval attaché office at the embassy. I'm not leaving the country. I'm not leaving you." Grace pulled back slightly. Her hands came up to his face again, the jawline, the cheekbones, the brow, seeing him again. "You better not," she said, and her voice cracked on a laugh. "Because I just started liking you and I'm a very slow learner." He kissed her forehead, then her temple, then, gently, her mouth. She kissed him back, and it was not dramatic or cinematic or any of the things stories pretend first kisses are. It was soft and certain, and felt like arriving somewhere she had not known she was walking toward. 6 months later. Georgetown, Washington, D.C., one of the most beautiful and wealthiest neighborhoods in the capital. Grace had relocated, not because Jai-Ho asked her to, but because she had been offered a position as music program director at a prestigious arts foundation based in the city. Terrence had helped her find an apartment. It was bigger than her Portland place, with hardwood floors and tall windows that let in light she could not see, but could feel warm against her skin on clear mornings. The piano was the first thing she set up. She had new students now. She ran workshops. She was building something larger than anything she had imagined when she was teaching 6 kids in a scuffed-floor community center. But she still taught one student remotely every week, Miles, back in Portland, who was now playing Clair de Lune almost perfectly, and who told everyone at school that his piano teacher was blind and way cooler than any of their teachers. On a Friday evening, Jai-Ho came home from the attaché office in his white naval uniform. He set his cap on the table by the door and walked toward the sound of music. Grace was at the piano, running through a new arrangement for an upcoming workshop. She heard his footsteps, those precise, deliberate, military-measured steps, and smiled without turning around. "How was your day, Colonel?" she asked. "Better now," he said. He draped his uniform jacket over the back of the couch, walked to the piano, and sat beside her on the bench. She leaned into him. He put his arm around her. "Play something with me," she said. "I do not know how to play piano." She took his right hand and placed his index finger on a single white key. Middle C, the note Miles had struggled with, the note where every piece of music she taught began. "Then I'll teach you," she said. She pressed his finger down. The note rang out, clean and singular, filling the apartment. Then she placed her own fingers on the keys beside his and began to play slowly, simply one note at a time, and he followed. Their hands moved together on the piano keys. His, steady and precise, trained for command. Hers, graceful and knowing, trained for music. Finding a rhythm that neither of them had known they were missing until they found it in each other. Outside the apartment, the lights of Georgetown glowed against the evening sky. Inside, 2 people who had spent their lives building walls, one out of duty, one out of survival, sat side by side and played the simplest, most beautiful music either of them had ever heard. And neither one of them was alone anymore. Thank you for watching to the end. Please remember to click the subscribe button and make sure you like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you.